Running Sentences presents The Murderous Yacht, Part 2. The search begins. The group, now on a mission to solve the case, do all they can to begin searching the ship for answers, but the ship isn't exactly cooperating with them. The story is narrated and written by Michael Honnery. This is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, real situations, events, characters, businesses, and so on is purely coincidental. Copyright 2023, Michael Honnery. All rights reserved. Upon hearing what Blur had said, the whole lot of them rushed to see and poured into this lounge room. Blur had tried to get out of the way, but despite his best efforts, found himself pushed in as well, though not far into the room. The whole group had stopped by the doorway to look at where Ebenezer sat on his chair. He was in fact still there, but now he was missing his head, and his arms, of all things.
"Oh, that's what you meant by yes and no." "Yeah, it's not a great thing to see. On the bright side, though, since all of us are together, that means that one of us is unlikely to be the killer, because someone had to do this. Unless, Scrape, we are working with someone else who is also aboard the ship. Highly likely, since this place seems so complex for one person alone to take this on. So, where does that leave us?"
Cobra paused after saying this, and then quickly added something else.
"If it were to me, this is probably how I would do it. Since all of us are detectives and have to think like criminals all the time, right? It's not just me thinking that, right? If it were to me, this was probably how it would be done, since all of us, whatever. Is anyone going to check the body?"
"Why would we do that?"
"It is rather suspicious that things look so clean over there. It makes me think this whole thing is, a setup, per se."
One by one they turned to look to judge for themselves if this was true or not. It was tidy over there, and where the head ought to be, it was rather a clean-looking cut. Eventually, Cobra, though, was the one who made her way over and quickly back to them.
"Everything is clean over there, and I did not see an idle body part lying about on the floor, or blood, I think. It didn't really look that hard." "What are we going to do about this? We can't leave the body just there." "Sure we can, Scrape. If the killer wants to make the body vanish, that's better for us, since we won't have to have something to worry about incriminating us, right? Maybe we should just go outside and let the body disappear and then, go on our way and say, 'Oh, we don't know what happened. The body disappeared.' Though, that probably isn't going to work, is it? So, shall we go find a computer room to see if that can tell us anything about what's happened?"
Since they were all mostly near the doorway anyway, it just required a little bit of sneaking out without anyone saying anything, lest the overhead voice of Ebenezer as the computer wouldn't suddenly shut the door on them. One by one they slipped out, with Cobra hurrying out last to get away from the gruesome, clean body, although she kept looking over her shoulder to make sure that it didn't move or try anything before she left. They hurried to find a new door to go through, since sticking around the ballroom area seemed like a rather meh idea. The call inside of each of them to find some other reason for all of this, strengthening its grip on their minds as they hurried about this ballroom until they found a door that led them to an elevator with 2 buttons, one with an arrow up and one leading downward. Both buttons were hit by hands, and the doors closed.
"We should go down." "Why would the ship's computer be down there, Scrape? Is the better answer?"
"Well, wherever the elevator takes us is the way we're going to go first, okay?" It rapidly began sinking, ending the conversation. Its doors would open into a narrow corridor of a hallway with a number of doors on each side of it. One by one they exited and began to trek down this hall to see if they could find an appropriate room. Each door here that they would peek into seemed more like a storage space than a room for a computer. The end of the hallway was there before they knew it, and they found themselves at another elevator, which sat there waiting for them, with its doors opening as they approached it, and so they went in. It first stopped at the ballroom area, but Bouquet was quick to press the button to keep them heading upward. The doors then opened to a much nicer hallway that spread out before them in a grand hallway space, and then narrowing again towards the end of the other side. All four could easily step off the elevator and walk out this time.
We should have listened to me. This place is much more likely to have what we need. Shut up, Blur, and start searching for anything interesting.
He stuck out his tongue at Bouquet, but moved on towards a nearby door. All of them had found 4 separate doors, and were all zipped open as they approached them. But they all stopped when they realized they were all about to step into different rooms.
This is fine, right? We know that there is some other killer out there, and it isn't one of us, right? No, it isn't fine. What if the killer pops up and takes you out? If all of us are doing our own thing, then there's a good chance that that might happen.
There was a pause before Bouquet offered a small cough and an answer to that.
Fine, Scrape. You and I will go into this one. Blur and Cobra, you take the one you prefer, okay?
She pointed towards the door, and Scrape came over to her in a hurry as the other 2 shrugged in agreement. Those 2 pointed towards a different door, and headed towards that while Bouquet waited for Scrape to get up to her. He was a bit slow, but got over, and she allowed him to step through the room first. They both watched each other carefully, trying to judge one another as they entered into this room. A small but spacious office greeted Bouquet and Scrape as they went in. The rug was thick and soft under their feet as they looked about and spotted a bookcase-covered room. The center of this place had 2 sitting chairs and a table between them, with some old games set up on it. Scrape wasted no time in locating a desk, which in here sat against the wall and set to one of the bookcases that was along the wall.
I will search these. You do whatever you want.
What he said was mostly ignored by Bouquet. She was attracted to a painting that had a space in a bookcase cut out for it to be placed against the wall. It was a simple painting, nothing complex or original looking about it, but it was of a landscape, and it was also perfectly placed. Moreover, it was big enough to hide a safe.
Yes, watch out for things, though.
She was at the painting now and gently touched the frame to see if it would move or jiggle a little bit. It held firm in place, and so the search for anything out of place began from both of them.
Be on the lookout for a switch of some sort. I always am. Do you have something over there?
Oh, potentially, if this piece of art is what I expect it is. Of course, it could be a ruse, since we are playing a rich man's game. The door that Cobra and Blur had chosen led them into a bedroom. A soft-looking room, by the way. The walls were painted to give a mellow feeling. Here, too, a plush carpet made for an easy walking experience as they moved through the rather sparsely populated space. There were 2 bureaus and a rather big bed, and then there were the 2 doors, one on the left and one on the right wall.
Nice place. Is it? I thought the rich were fancier than this.
You're right, I guess it does feel off, but let's start searching anyway. The 2 bureaus first, I guess. There was a shrug from Blur, and he moved on to the one on the right side of the room, while Cobra moved to the one on the left, trying to look over this sleek, dark wooden object. 3 sections could easily be pulled out, judging from the handles, but would they? To Cobra, this smelt distinctly like a setup. Too easy, too calm, too simple.
Do I have to say this? What? Watch out for tramps? We're both detectives, and we both know that what is before us is merely for appearance. I've never accepted anything at face value ever, and I won't start now. You can do that if you wish, though. She approached her bureau, and with her hands on the first top drawer, gently tugged.
The desk in the office contained many drawers, all of which Scrape opened in quick succession. They were empty, aside from the neat and tidy bound notebooks inside of each drawer, one each and carefully placed right in the center of each drawer.
I feel like this is a puzzle.
What is?
This whole situation, but right now, the desk I'm looking at.
Oh, so we're being tested then?
That's what I felt before, but now, great, just great. We've confirmed it. It's a test. I hate tests.
Yep, it is lovely to be told that you're great and then have the extra test thrown at you. Silence followed as he began pushing at the notebooks to see if they would move. They came out of their spots easily, and he opened them up to look them over. Blank pages greeted him at each book, which he would then put to the side and look over the drawer itself for any hidden secret parts to it. No buttons or false bottoms were felt, and he moved on to the next one with similar results and notebooks being pulled out and so on. When all 5 drawers were checked, and the notebooks were placed on top of the desk, he took a step back. There was some sort of trick here, but he couldn't see what it was. The whole desk looked like the normal thing, though cheaply made, more cheap wood looking than he'd expected.
Are you having any luck, Bucket?
My painting won't move an inch, and there's no obvious buttons around here, or any not-so-obvious buttons so far over here. What about you?
A desk with things in it, but no information. It's all too neat by what I can see.
This is a big setup then, is it?
It feels like that to me, but I don't know why.
Well, what appearances are appearances sometimes. Could be this whole thing is fake just to fuck with us. He turned to look over to see what she was doing, since no reply came immediately. He spotted her, and sort of let his jaw drop. Bouquet had managed to clamber up onto the painting and was holding onto it by the frame. It still wasn't moving, but she was trying everything to make it do so.
I see, you're busy. Sorry.
His attention went back to the desk, where he decided to try and rearrange the notebooks into different drawers, see what would happen then. Not that he remembered which ones would belong to which, though he noted for the first time that they all had numbers on the cover. He blinked, and they were gone. Roughly, he put them in the spots, changing up where they were and then closing the drawers once he was done. It took several rearrangements before a satisfying click happened somewhere. It sounded below, but he wasn't entirely sure, but it froze him up. Oh boy. A fine, powdery film began emitting from the desk, choking the air in front of him. The drawer opened easily for Cobra, and she stared down at the empty compartment which greeted her. It was not what she was expecting, since clothes should be here. Instead, there were a bunch of numbers. 12, 5, 200, 4, and 45 were carved into the bottom of the top shelf. She blinked at it and thought some on what she was seeing. A puzzle. That's what you are hiding in a drawer? But I don't have anything to put these numbers to. She closed this first drawer after sort of memorizing the numbers and opened the second one. This was filled with odd-looking things, but mostly socks. A moment of pawing through this brought nothing of interest to her, and it was closed. The last drawer on the bottom refused to open, no matter how much jiggling and pushing she did. The thing would move, but never outward. Blur, did you get anything? There was a silence, and so she swirled around, hands up, ready for anything. The room was empty, aside from her. She did notice that there was a door in the floor, though, where there hadn't been one. It was right in front of the bureau that Blur had gone to. A frown came to her as she wondered if she had caused that, or if it was his own damned fault. There was also a chance that it was both, as she hurried over towards this hole, taking carefully planned steps so that nothing might happen to her. Blur, are you down there?
Ow.
Still alive?
I said ow, didn't I? What the fuck else would ow imply, Cobra?
The frown deepened. He didn't have to be so uppity about such things. Did you do anything to set this off?
I opened the drawers, and that's it. They were filled with clothes. Nothing of interest from what I saw.
And do you see anything of interest down there? The pitch-dark hole she was shouting down showed no signs of revealing anything aside from Blur's voice.
I can't fucking see shit.
Cobra frowned and looked around once more. There were sheets on the bed, which might be usable as a rope, potentially. Blur wasn't too big of a creature, perhaps not too heavy. Instead of asking if he needed further help, she went over to the bed sheets and began pulling them off one by one. The duvet cover had the number on it, as did the two sheets she pulled off, 3, 10, and 23, which she noted into her memory and hoped weren't going to be useful later, because she was likely going to forget them. The sheets were then quickly tied end to end, with the hopes that they would support some weight and would go far enough down. Wasting no time, she then lowered this new makeshift rope down into the hole. I've made a rope from bed sheets. If you can try and grab it, you might be able to get out. But you need to be quick.
Thanks.
In a surprisingly fast fashion, Blur was out of the hole and back into the bedroom. The sheets were torn and stretched a bit, but had held together.
This place is a madhouse.
It's probably designed that way. By the way, I discovered numbers in the bureau and on the bed.
Nowhere to input those numbers, though, or anything to help us?
She made a notion about the Spartan room that he was already well aware of. Nothing much was in here. They both, though, took a moment to take it in and be safe, to get a feel in case anything else had changed in their little puzzle that they'd had sprung on them. Perhaps we take the moment to reunite with the other two and see how they're doing.
I want to keep searching here, but, yeah, let's go over there.
The two backed out of the room, keeping their eyes on things. The sound of heavy coughing made Bouquet let go of the painting and spin about. Scrape was a little ways away, and was stepping into and out of a glittery cloud of dust that enveloped the area that he was in.
What did you do?
His coughs were rather heavy, and it took him a moment before he was able to get anything out.
I moved some stuff about.
You realize that we're in a ship that is probably filled with these sorts of things, right?
Yes, of course. But I just didn't expect it to befall me in this manner. I'm better than this.
The door hissed its way open and out into the hallway as Blur and Cobra backed their way into the room, and when the door closed again, they spun about to see Scrape still fighting with some coughs, but not much else going on.
What happened to you two? Why are you two here already? We ran into a trap door that made Blur disappear. What has happened here?
A glittery substance has overtaken our friend Scrape. Bouquet took a few steps and felt the floor suddenly bow under her feet. As fast as she could, she backed up, but the entire floor opened and dropped away. The drop would last for about 10 feet and left them in total darkness, as the floor that was now a ceiling snapped shut above them. There was a moment of shuffling about as they all got up and found themselves rather close to one another.
Everyone okay?
Grumbles greeted him as he tried to find some space. There was a little light that flickered on, and it seemed to come from Scrape as he held up his hand.
Do none of you come prepared for these sorts of things? We're detectives, and we're supposed to be ready for all things to happen.
The soft glow of light, it gave them a little better perspective on things. It wasn't bad when they realized that they were in a room that was small, that pushed them all together, and there was a door that could potentially lead out. Their luck, however, was not so good on that front, since the door opened inward, and there was a lot of shuffling about to get it to open, with the 4 of them in there. One by one they stepped out, and then fell another few feet, before landing on the slippery floor of the ballroom. All 4 got up, frustrated, and looked about. Nothing here appeared to have changed.
What was all of that?
Aside from odd, you mean?
It was odd, Bouquet, very much so, but I guess that's how all of this was set up. Because Ebenezer already knew who was coming for him, right? Yes, or yep. That's the way it looks, anyway. Otherwise, why set up all this madness? Did any of you get anything, by the way? I found a bunch of numbers, no answers. I found some notebooks that I think had numbers on them, but the numbers soon vanished. Are any of you good at numbers puzzles? Because that seems to be what was up there. That still doesn't give us much to go on, does it? We got sent back to where all of this started? Maybe this is like a board game. Numbers move us forward and doing things without those gets us sent backwards. They all looked about at one another, getting a felt kind of right, but Scrape was nodding yes to Bouquet's statement, but the other two didn't seem as sure of it. Well, let's go back upstairs into the office. I have a great feeling that there's something there that we're supposed to find. It will help. I think maybe put you two at ease, maybe put all of us at ease. Blur eyed him and thought about this offer. Well, the other two VML's detectives had decided this was an all-right course of action and began heading towards the elevator. He, on the other hand, he didn't trust any of them. What makes you say that? The books. The empty notebooks felt like they should have something. Since they don't have that, that means somewhere there's a book that does, or there's paper that does. You don't go about making a puzzle and put a solution on the other side of the vessel. Well, I mean, some people probably do, but I wouldn't. It's just to check over our work. Make sure that we're checking everything in that office, really. There's probably a solution in there somewhere. But you can do whatever you wish. I don't trust this. It feels set up. I think you're one of the ones responsible for all of this. I am not, and I've never met this Ebenezer before or knew of him. The two began walking towards the elevator, keeping an eye on one another as they went, trust falling to an all-time level of low. The office was as they had left it, though the floor now felt solid, like it wasn't about to open up. All of them were on their toes, though, and were stepping carefully about the place, hoping that it would stay the way it was now. Where would those notebooks have these answers be that you seek out, Scrape? The room safe, probably, since this office screams that it should have one. I didn't ask you, Bucket. My clue was in the books in the desk, with numbers that appeared on them briefly. We should be careful with them, though, since that may set off a trap from earlier. They did. Or it may have been Bouquet over there climbing on the wall, trying to get at the painting to get it to move. We don't know for sure. Isn't that true, Bouquet? And so far, we don't know much other than that this place feels like the entire thing wants to come down on us. They crowded around the desk floor, staring at the notebooks that were now on top of it as they pulled them out. Scrape scowled since he couldn't remember in which order they came out of or in which drawer they came from. The whole thing was a mess, and each of them picked up a notebook. I'm not seeing any numbers on these. I saw them on the cover of each, but only for a moment before they were gone. Just look through the notebooks, make sure they were fine. There was a rapid flipping through pages by Bouquet, who came to a stop on a page. Found it. The book was held up, though it showed no number on it. Bucket, that's a blank page. What? No, the number was right here. It was 25. She had pulled the book back and looked at the page as a puzzled expression crossed her face. She was shaking her head as Blur began to flip through the notebook he had pulled up in his hands. It took a little bit, but he came to a stop and watched, then began to flip forward towards the cover on the book with wide eyes. His efforts in hand-waving pointed towards his own notebook and managed to gather everyone's attention. The number is moving through the book, and it's some sort of crazy shit. With this information, they went ahead to get the numbers from all of the books. 25, 9, 33, 54, and 2 were found. And that left them to look around for a place to put these numbers. This is like the numbers I found in the bedroom. They have nowhere to go. They probably don't relate to the desk drawers, but I think it has something to do with the desk. Scrape then hurried in motion and scurried so that he could be where the chair might be pushed in. There was no chair, so it was easy to get into this space, but a glance about this dark spot brought no immediate answers. He brought out his flashlight from before and showed it all around before coming to a stop at a small box-like spot in the side of the desk. It didn't fit the rest of it at all. Hold on, I might have found a switch of some sort. 3 sets of hands thumped onto something as he pressed down hard. A click sounded, and then nothing. He waited for a few seconds more and flashed the light about to see if there were any changes outside of this desk, but got nothing. Anything happen up there, guys and gals? He scooted out when no reply came, worried that something had happened. Only took a second for him to see that the crowd gathered up around the desk and was pressing buttons. Let's see, I remember these numbers. Cobra hit a quick few buttons and was rewarded with a loud click. Back on his feet, Scrape could now see a little flip-up piece on the desk that had appeared. Just above it, there was a slot that had also opened, which was curious, and he swore that something was coming out of it. A book flew out at high speed, conking him in the head and sending him back to the ground as Blur grabbed up the book. There was a bit of a wrestling match, as Bouquet had also tried to grab a hold of it. I've got it. No, I do. There were a few rough seconds before Blur managed to get it, since it was all too slippery for Bouquet. He then opened this up and began looking through it. Yuck, this is nonsense. What does that mean, Blur? All of it is written in a weird language that my automatic eye translators don't work on, so it is not words that I'm looking at. So is it a code? I don't know. There are no key to the code from what we can see that will clue me into what any of this means. There was a pause on the page as he looked up close and then pulled back. There was some stuff that was understandable though, but most of it seemed to be much of a puzzle. What is it that you have? I think it's a word puzzle. I have a face, I talk every hour, yet I am shy. That's one example. Here's another. The bots go right, the machines go left. People walk straight, which is going in the wrong direction. That sounds complicated. Yet interesting, Cobra. Very interesting. Things to think about since we don't have much to go on with this murdering body that's been mutilated. A puzzle to solve a murder, or to get to the murderer. Isn't this all overly complex? It feels like we're being led around by the nose, you two. And 3, I guess. If we want out of here, we have no choice, Scrape. Are there any other little word clues in there, Blur? Here's another one. 3 answers needed, 2 are found, and a 3rd awaits. Collect and process what you know. A slow, melancholy silence fell over them as they thought about these clues. There was something obvious about them, but at the same time rather obtuse. Well, the first one seems like it has the most promise, and the easiest to potentially solve. Agreed, Scrape, but what has a face, speaks, and is shy? Another silence followed about the room before Cobra, with a polite cough, caught everyone's attention. These rooms are pretty vacant, right? Yes, so? What? What's the problem, Cobra? Well, we didn't really examine the study lounge area where Ebenezer was murdered, did we? You think something is there? Yes, I do, Bouquet. I think we will find a clock-like device somewhere in that room. Realization danced across each of their faces as they tuned into what the clue was hinting at. Well, shall we go then? It is the only clue that we have right now, and we might have an answer to it. Yes, we shall. Lead the way, Blur, since you found this information with Cobra solving it. You two get the honors. You mean befall the tramps?
If it happens, then sure.
All four exited, regarding each other carefully, with each of them paying extra attention to Scrape after his comments, and keeping an eye on their environment around them, just to be safe.
Arriving back at the murder spot, they found it empty of the body of Ebenezer. A quick search showed no signs of what had happened to it. It only took a few minutes before their attention was re-centered on finding this clock.
It's gotta be obvious, right? How can we miss big or small clock in a room? This room of all of them.
A look around had them looking at the dilapidated-looking clock that had been right across from where Ebenezer had been sat. They approached it, looking it over, without touching it. What might have been called a grandfather clock was in bad shape, with rotten wood, a bent face, and a heavy lean to the right, like it wanted to topple over.
So what importance is this clock?
It might have the weapons that killed him. If Ebenezer is actually dead, yes, it might happen. Or maybe a fake weapon that killed him. Maybe something. Who knows? Yes, Cobra, if he's dead and the killer hasn't cleaned up this place, then maybe it's inside and, all of that. The four were gathered around the clock in a semicircle, none of them willing to be the one that reached out for it. The outward examination had revealed so little other than it looked like they found themselves giving off frustrated little sighs. The clock seemed to be working, it seemed to be in bad shape. Nothing out of the ordinary, aside from it being so terrible looking. They were all trying to find new angles to look at it that might give them a look at its inner workings.
Look, I'm a gelatin-like blob. If none of you mind, I can try to wiggle my way inside. I can keep my shape pretty small. It won't touch the walls or anything else. I need to get up, and I'm sly, I'm slim, I can do everything.
Cobra and Bouquet were equally shaking their heads no to this. I don't trust that. You might destroy the weapon. I agree with Cobra.
Oh, wait a second, though. In order for us to have been the murderer, we would have had to have been here previously.
And didn't the owner of this place say that this was the first time any of us had been here?
Yes, he did. At least for me when I came in. With you, I don't remember, to be honest. Since there was stuff going on, well, I don't really care about you.
There was nothing going on at that moment, Blur. Blur had already made himself into a snake-like shape that moved towards the crack in the base of the clock that had opened the bottom of it, and would allow him to crawl inside. Bouquet tried to put her foot down in front of him, but Blur merely slipped up and over her foot, not bothered by it. Open the clock quick, so nothing had happened inside without us knowing. Duh! With Cobra saying this, then all three of them grabbed at the door of the body of the clock, which came away in their hands, crumpling into a mess of splinters. They would drop it instantly since they didn't want to get pricked themselves, and they fought over one another to be able to see inside without touching much further, for fear of destroying the entire thing. Blur, you stop it this instant.
No, I can see something behind the face area. I just can't tell what it is, but it is something from my perspective.
Cobra had reached out to try and move the clock face, which was not seated well in the clock itself. It creaked and moved a little, but not enough to see inside.
Oh, come on, break it already. We don't have time for this. I agree with Scrape, Cobra. You just break it open.
Annoyed, Cobra did exactly that, gripping and ripping the face of the clock. This time it did move, with a massive protest of noise, but it didn't break, and once open they found themselves face to face with a gun that had a timer next to it. They stared, and Blur had arrived to look at it now as well.
Is that the murder weapon?
Maybe. I can't tell. It doesn't look like it was fired. Cobra leaned in and then took a moment to realize she was right in front of the weapon and stepped to the side to be safe. This put Bouquet in line of the weapon, and she took a moment before also stepping to the side to get away from it.
Blur, can you tell if that gun has been fired and what type of weapon it is?
The snake-like shape of Blur slid closer and eventually wrapped its way around the weapon, a small, silvery thing that glistened in the light. The added weight of Blur bent it a bit out of position as he looked it over.
This is a Mark V bullet laser blaster. It has a royal government marking on it, and from the smell of it, yes, it's been fired.
So we have a murder weapon. Yes, Bouquet, but no body and nothing beyond this now found weapon, or a reason for any of this to have occurred. Plus, the question of why not take the weapon. Well, it could be they felt no one would look for it, Cobra.
And the clue was given to us by a dead man, supposedly. Let us not forget that part.
Yeah, can we really consider this a clue, then, Blur? It feels like this whole thing has been set up for us to find. Nod came from Cobra, who pointed towards Scrape in agreement with him. Yes, it makes me suspect that this old man isn't really dead. This is all some sort of test, as we've been hypothesizing. But we saw a real body, and that was, well, it was talking through the computer to us. Maybe that was really him?
But the kill happened in the dark, and to swap out a body in moments, well...
It was too quick to swap out a body, Blur, if that was the case, dead or not. Although, with how many secret spaces this place seems to have, who knows what's happened. They fell silent, as the clue they had, unfortunately, seemed to have led nowhere. Great. Blur wrapped around the weapon a few more times in a snake-like form to look for any other signs or clues. We have a murder weapon, which is great. Potentially a murder weapon. We don't know if it was actually used. But we also have 2 other riddles from the book. Could those
lead us
somewhere? Scrape grumbled as he tried to remember what was said as Blur came out of the clock. They were soon joined by the blob of Blur, now bigger and easier to understand shape.
Machines to the left, people go forward, robots or bots to the right or something like that, which is going the wrong way.
It will have something to do with the ship, likely, but I can't figure out where. Why do you say that, Cobra? Why it has to do with the ship, Scrape? Because the first clue did, and what else do we have aside from this ship? Scrape thought nodded in disagreement. This made sense.
Aren't machines and robots the same thing, by the way? And we haven't seen either of those so far in our exploration of this ship.
No, they are different. Probably meant the machine like an engine or something. Bots are the average helper, though I suppose you could call those machines as well. Yes. Bouquet. Well, finding an engine room seems like the best idea then, doesn't it? That or the kitchen. When no one responded, Scrape began moving towards the door, and the rest sort of absent-mindedly began to follow him out. They wound up downstairs, and after taking a short elevator ride down, and found themselves confronted. A rather big robot-looking machine greeted them as they stepped out into the hallway to the downstairs section of the ship. It had red glowing eyes and held out its hands towards them. The elevator, which dropped them off, had closed its doors, and there was no sign for a call button. With a mechanical whine, the robot lifted its leg and began marching towards them. End of Part 2 of The Murderous Yacht. Thank you for listening.